I'd like to show you another game from the match between AlphaZero and Stockfish. These are new games that have been released by Google DeepMind to coincide with the publication of their peer review paper on reinforcement learning. These games are just fascinating. We can learn so much from them. And just a reminder about AlphaZero, this is a unique entity. It teaches itself how to do activities with just being fed some basic rules. So with chess, it was given the basic rules of the game and then it played against itself and developed an understanding and developed its own rules on how to play the game. And in so doing, it achieved a rating of something like 3,400 through playing against Stockfish, one of the best chess engines out there. So, of course, it's worth looking at its games just because it's achieved that incredible chess level, but also because it plays in such a unique way, not in a human way, not in the way that a normal chess engine plays. And I think this game really exemplifies its style very well because it plays in such a bold way. Now, the opening here was set by the team, and they've taken a position that was used in the Top Chess Engine Championship, and then played a game. So basically, they tested AlphaZero in various forms. So without an opening book, sometimes with a standard chess opening position, and this one is one of these positions from the Chess Engine Championship that they've selected. So a testing ground for both machines. So this is the starting position of the game, and theoretically it's a very well-known position from, well, King's Indian, Benoni, however you want to call this, can arise from both those openings. So here AlphaZero is playing with black, and it plays h5, which is actually a standard move in this position. Stockfish castles, also a standard move, and here AlphaZero starts to go its own way. It plays h4, which you'd think is kind of a natural continuation to keep pushing the h-pawn. Actually, it's quite rare, and I'll explain why in a second. The standard continuation here is to play a6, and first of all, knight h7, and only then to push the h-pawn, and f5, and black has counterplay. This is just a very double-edged position. This is played, for example, by Judith Polgar, by Shirov, some really top players. So what's the difference between this and the line that AlphaZero plays? Well, first of all, you can see in this standard main line, this knight does not run into any difficulties. If the pawn goes to f4, it could either go to g4 or it could drop back here, or even to d7. So the black knight is not in any difficulties. Now compare with how AlphaZero plays, which is incredibly risky, at least to humanize at any rate. So first of all, it pushes the knight back and plays h3. Now, from a kind of attacking viewpoint, then this is really what black wants, because it opens up the king. So g3 played. g4 is also possible. That's a bit looser, actually, and makes it harder to get in f4. g3 is correct. So what's the big difference here? Well, if black tries to push the f-pawn now, then white's knight is already in a very nice position here. So after f5, f4, and the h-pawn is vulnerable. e5 is actually a very strong move. And here you can see bishop attacks the rook, and this pawn is vulnerable. The d-pawn is also very strong. But AlphaZero plays in a very different way. It doesn't want to play with f5. It plays bishop d7. But this is fantastically risky because you can see that this knight is in great danger of being trapped. But it's very interesting that its first idea is to actually open up white's king. So that pawn on h3 is potentially a real thorn for white because it sets up, potential mating nets. The downside is that that knight is in danger of being trapped. Now f4 isn't possible at the moment because the knight will come to g4. That's very nice. But sooner or later that knight could be in trouble. This is actually such a tricky position already. If knight f2 looks very natural in order to push f4 because the knight colours here, then b5 can be played, and the knight does have a square here. Of course, this involves some kind of pawn sacrifice, but there'll be play down the b file, so that's possible. a4 looks reasonable to stop b5, but then queen b6 is tricky, threatening this, threatening the pawn on b2, and potentially queen b4 looks at some key squares that maybe knight c4 comes. So Stockfish played rook c1. Seems reasonable to take the rook off the long diagonal. And now you can see how aggressively AlphaZero plays b5 anyway. Now if this is taken, it's actually possible to take this pawn. But there are a couple of things. Possibly just taking and rook b8. That's one idea. Possibly queen b6. And this mad continuation here. And who knows what is going on in that position. White has lots of pawns, but, well, the king is potentially open. Very open along, this diagonal here. Who knows how AlphaZero would have played if that pawn had been taken. In any case, Stockfish played knight f2, which is it seems more solid in a way, because the knight comes back into play, the knight covers the g4 square, and looks here as well, and blocks this diagonal too. But AlphaZero doesn't panic. Rook e8, an incredibly calm move. King goes in the corner, and the pawn pushes on, and the knight goes back to b1. So, both sides are really kind of hanging, hanging by a thread, is that the right expression? It's just such a double-edged position, it really is. And this is a crunch moment where black has a lot of different alternatives, all very plausible. You might like to kind of pause the video for a moment and think how you'd play with black in this position. Black's next move might surprise you. Maybe that's just that's a big fat clue. But, well, for example, white would like to play f4 to trap that knight. So queen c8 is possible to give additional cover to the g4 square. So f4, knight g4 is possible. And then knight d2. Then a6 with perhaps the idea of bishop b5, and that gives the knight some room back on d7. That's plausible. There's a6 as well, with the idea of bishop b5, but then f4, and here's a crazy piece sacrifice, and knight e4, and this is actually quite unclear, because you can see once that f-pawn is advanced, it means the king is weaker. The bishops here are kind of in the sights of that rook. Now we can understand the move rook e8. Queen a5 is also possible with the same idea, with this piece sacrifice, and then knight e4. That's a crazy idea. But in fact, AlphaZero jumped before it was pushed, and it played knight eg4 straight away. This is unbelievable chess. So active. And after pawn takes knight, knight takes e4. And this was exchanged off. So at the moment, black has just one pawn for the piece. But it's all about the king. You compare the two kings. White's king is far more exposed than black's. And this bishop strikes down the long diagonal. And I don't like these bishops here. So bishop f4 is logical and also looks at the pawn d6. So queen e7. So there's no massive follow-up here. It's just steady stuff. Bishop f3. That was on prise. And now another mad move. Bishop takes b2. Well, we should look at the captures. So remember, black is still a piece down. If bishop takes rook, then check. Queen f3. It's actually playable for white. And now bishop takes g4. If this one comes across, then that c pawn combined with the bishop is very dangerous. That knight certainly doesn't look very good there. And the king's miles away, and potentially there are back rank problems as well. Not great. Or rook f2, we take here. And black is a piece down, but has 3 pawns for the piece. Potential to attack the king. That bishop could also potentially target the d5 pawn. Excellent compensation for black. So back in this position, bishop takes d6, played by Stockfish, fighting fire with fire. So that was taken, and bishop takes rook. And now black is a whole rook down, and this was taken. It's not so laid back that it stays a rook down, not in this particular game anyway. Now if bishop takes pawn, then that actually slows things down, allows white to recover a little bit with knight d2. So instead bishop b5. So AlphaZero maintains the initiative by attacking the rook. Rook e1, and the rook comes to e8. So black is just very active here. What's the score? It's still only 1 pawn for the piece, but still problems here basically. The king and potential pins too. Alright, that looks reasonable. Knight d2. Brings the knight back into play, protects the bishop. c4. So this is black's big asset. The c-pawn. And if knight takes pawn, then queen c5. These pins are pretty nasty. Okay, let's go back. So knight f3 played. c3, the pawn advancing. This is incredibly cool play by AlphaZero. Queen f4. Now here, it's I think black's next move is, AlphaZero's next move is very surprising. Could just go into the endgame actually. Threatening to take this pawn, and black has enough play there. But instead, it keeps the queens on. Now that is a very brave move. Because it's now Stockfish's chance to attack knight e5, hitting the pawn on f7. Rook e7. Queen comes to f6. And now it's all happening. c2. You want to get a queen, but, well, I would say that both sides had calculated what comes next, because now actually it's a forced draw. Check. King here. Well, in fact, there's no way out. Although, well, both sides try a little bit actually. It looks very, very scary. But after d6, it's very important that AlphaZero gets a queen, because now, well, obviously that queen can't be taken because of the mate threats. But basically, it's really important that that rook is pinned and can't take part in the action. And AlphaZero is just in time to hold the game. And Stockfish forces a draw like this. If it's actually possible to take that bishop, that will result in a draw because it's basically only the queen attacking because the rook is pinned. But it's funny, kind of AlphaZero sort of plays on and makes white prove that it's a draw. It shows just the incredible, well, I mean, to use words like bravery, obviously it's a very human trait. But I just find it remarkable that it still wants to sort of play on. I mean, this is obviously just a draw. But they repeat a few times, and then something bizarre happens. Instead of going up the board, it goes back down. I mean, going up the board would just be a draw, and then throws in bishop e8. So it just keeps going. I mean, this is incredible. It doesn't change the result at all, actually, because black can't avoid the perpetual. But I just think it's funny that it wants to sort of prolong the game and hope, who knows, hope, again, another very human emotion, hope that white will perhaps deviate and it can keep playing for a win. But no, there is absolutely nothing here. We're going through the motions. I may as well just go to the end. But basically the last 25 moves have actually been superfluous because it was clear, I'm sure, to both machines that this was going to end in a draw. And here, finally, a draw was agreed. But what an exciting game. And this is such a very different way of playing this kind of Benoni system. Because normally, black takes care of that knight in the middle of the board. Let me just get to the position. Yeah, around here. Black normally takes great care to give that knight its freedom, but playing like this is quite extraordinary, that AlphaZero is prepared to leave this one in quite a precarious position and in fact gives it up to get well, quite a fantastic initiative, but Stockfish survived. So a draw, great stuff. I mentioned previously that a book is coming out in January, published by New in Chess, called Game Changer, written by the English Grandmaster Matthew Sadler and international player Natasha Regan, who is a mathematician as well as being a very strong chess player. And they will be going into more detail on AlphaZero and its chess playing exploits in the match against Stockfish. So do look out for that. And I'll be demonstrating more games very soon. Thanks for watching.